Thank you very much for that introduction. Thanks to all of you for coming this evening, and thanks in particular to the various organizations that have sponsored this event. Jim Fell and I are hardly strangers. We have done this so often that we only semi-facetiously say that one of these times we should show up for a campus debate and each of us identify ourselves as the other and see how well we can represent the other's point of view and see how long it takes for the audience to figure out what we're doing. That is not the case tonight, but one of these times we're going to try it, and it could be interesting. And to say that is to say that while there will be a certain clash of views that you will hear this evening, that clash will be civil and cordial, respectful, and related to what I think is a common purpose, which is how to ensure, how to maximize the safety of young adults and the preparation of young adults to make responsible decisions about alcohol. So while we may disagree about the effect of current policy and the need to change current policy, I think we emphatically agree on what the goal of policy, current or amended, should be. I might also say that for those of you who may not be able to remember every syllable of what is said tonight, you will find essays written both by Mr. Fell and by me in a book that's just out called Debating Reform, edited by Mike Nelson, Richard Kersch, and published by the Congressional Quarterly Press. So that if you would like to revisit these arguments at leisure, and we get no royalties for that, so I'm not shilling for anything that has personal gain, but it is a place where this issue, along with a great many others, are debated in much of the language and with much of the citations that you will hear this evening. And finally, I'd like to point out that there is some material on the table in the back relating to Choose Responsibility, so that if you would like to learn more about CR, or if you feel yourselves moved to get more involved in the work that we're doing, there's information about the organization and ways in which you can make your interest known to us so that we can continue this conversation as time goes by. It's kind of interesting to be introduced as someone who did a stint on Colbert. And of all the things I've had to do in connection with this issue, that was by far the most challenging. Happy to report, and I only learned this recently, that we were the third most viewed program in all of 2009 of the Colbert Report. Now make of that what you will, but I think one of the things that might be made of it is that at least that viewership, which includes which is a demographic that includes those of you in this room, somehow or other found out about that program and in almost record numbers turned out to hear that interview. And if you missed it, you can come to our website and you'll see it there. Now, finally, to the presentation. Interesting article appeared just several weeks ago in the New Yorker magazine. Malcolm Gladwell, author of The Tipping Point, wrote in that article of Americans' approach to alcohol as follows: we moralize, we medicalize, we legalize. His essay in the New Yorker focuses on the work of anthropologists and psychologists and their finding, which is particularly interesting and which lies at the heart of the presentation I will make this evening, is that cultural rules and structures that create norms and standards that are clear and consistent might be a far more effective way to minimize alcohol's deleterious effects than pronouncements, penalties, or prohibition. Now, not all of that is a direct quote from Gladwell. What he wrote is enclosed in quotation marks. But I think you will find this article interesting, and I'll make some additional references to it as we go forward. To say that, and to say that this is a cultural issue, and to say that we need to address it in that way, is also to say that cultural attitudes change over time. To say that is to say that it's not 1984 anymore. Now, that is hardly a profound insight. We all know it's not 1984 anymore, but current policy relative to the drinking age has locked us, presumably for all time, into what the particular culture of 1984 was, what the particular problems of 1984 were, and what the supposed best practices and best solutions of 1984 were thought to be. It isn't 1984 anymore, and in my view, the issues surrounding alcohol and its presence in the lives of young adults is very different from what it was in 1984. And I want you to keep that in mind. The second thing I want you to keep in mind is the fact that the law is very clear. The law doesn't say drink occasionally. The law doesn't say drink in moderation. The law doesn't say drink responsibly. It says until you're 21, don't drink. And when I hear it reported that 25% of incoming students at Boston College are abstainers, I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But one of the things that might be made of it is that 75% are not. And if that's the case, it's a little hard. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not an expert in public health. I have not done original research on this subject. But I know that when I hear that 75% of a population has consumed alcohol, it's a little hard for me to accept in the next breath the assertion that the law that says nobody should be consuming alcohol until they turn 21 is working very well. We can talk more about that, but that's one conclusion that might be drawn. What do I mean when I say that it's not 1984 anymore? Well, I mean simply this. In 1984, Congress passed the National Minimum Legal Drinking Age Act. And that act had in view the solution of what was a genuine and serious problem. And that was the problem of alcohol-related traffic fatalities. It was thought, rightly or wrongly, that the best way to reduce the number of drunken driving accidents was to raise the drinking age to 21. Now, of course, constitutionally, Congress couldn't do that. Constitutionally, the setting of the drinking age is exclusively within the purview of the states. That is why prohibition required a constitutional amendment. So what Congress did was very clever. What Congress said was the states may set the age wherever they choose, but if they set it lower than 21, they will forfeit 10% of their federal highway funds. Well, guess what? Within 3 years, every state had made its age 21, and for the next 25 years, no state has seriously debated the law or how well it's working. Because what state then or now is going to be willing to put at risk 10% of its federal highway funds? That's where we were in 1984. That's not where we are in 2010. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment and about the highway fund consequences in a moment. But the problem of 2010, as has already been alluded, is very different. And we can call it binge drinking, we can call it reckless, goal-oriented drinking, we can call it drinking to intoxication, but whatever we want to call it, we know it when we see it, and we know it is taking place among the young adult population. And we know that it has taken lives far above and beyond the lives taken on the highways. And perhaps you know the story of Gordy Bailey. He was a freshman at the University of Colorado, found dead inside his fraternity house. He and other pledges had begun the evening blindfolded and abandoned in the woods. His blood alcohol level at the time of his death was .328, 4 times the legal limit. His parents, Gordy died alone in an empty room with his friends surrounding him. It's just very preventable. It's just inexcusable. Gordy's parents appeared on the 60 Minutes program about the drinking age. Gordy Bailey's parents believed that the drinking age encouraged the consumption to go underground, to go off campus, to go behind closed doors. And why they would not say that the drinking age caused their son's death, they certainly would say, and did say, that the drinking age created an environment where the loss of life was made more probable. What is the toll that binge drinking is taking? And by the way, these are not opinions masquerading as facts. Everything that you're going to see in this presentation is footnoted in peer-reviewed research. 56% increase in binge drinking in the decade of the 1990s. More than 90% of all alcohol consumed by underage drinkers is consumed during binge drinking episodes. 35% of 18 to 20-year-olds binge drink. How much more such success can we stand? Despite efforts at prevention, says the Journal of the American Medical Association, the prevalence of binge drinking among college students is continuing to rise. This isn't my opinion, this is the AMA, and so are the harms associated with it. In a study of college freshmen, 20% of males frequently drank more than 10 drinks in an evening, and in a recent study at a major university, treatment for alcohol overdose has gone up by 84% in the last 3 years. That's 2005 to 2008. And the average BAC of those admitted rose to 0.25. That's the average. How much more success can we stand? Where does binge drinking take place? Well, this is a bone of contention. Ernie Boyer, I think, had it right almost a generation ago when he wrote, college officials have agreed with students that the change in minimum age has not stopped student drinking. We've seen that. It hasn't stopped student drinking. It has only displaced it. Now, I leave it to you, based on your own observations and your own experience, to determine whether that is the case or not. But what seems to be abundantly clear is that this law has driven alcohol consumption from public places and public view. You're not likely to be able to go into a bar or a restaurant, a student center, or other public gathering place and be served under 21. And yet 75% are consuming. Well, what does that leave? If it's not in a public place, that leaves only one place, doesn't it? It leaves exactly the places where you know and I know alcohol is being consumed. Behind closed doors, underground, off campus, where pre-gaming, where preloading, and where all sorts of other things take place, because, whether we like it or not, alcohol is a reality in the lives of young adults. And so the question before us is, do we try to change that reality, which for the last 25 years we have tried to do, or instead do we try to create the safest possible environment for that reality, which is what I and my organization propose. Over 1,400 lives of 18 to 24-year-olds are lost annually to alcohol off the highways. That's part of what I mean when I say this is no longer principally a highway safety problem. 60% of the deaths related to underage drinking occur off the highways. To put this another way, according to the NIAAA, of the 5,000 lives lost to alcohol each year, 5,000 by those under the age of 21, more than 60% of those lives are lost off the highways. This is not primarily, principally, a traffic safety problem any longer. It is a different kind of problem. And yet the law remains embedded in a transportation bill, and the measure of its success seems exclusively to be based on the number of alcohol-related traffic fatalities. That's a very narrow measurement. And it, however inadvertently and unintendedly, insults the loved ones of those who grieve over the loss of life to alcohol somewhere other than on the highways. Underage drinking accounts for more than just fatalities. 600,000 injuries, 97,000 cases of sexual assault, property damage, emergency room visits. This is the toll that alcohol consumption out of public view and out of public places is taking. It's not 1984 anymore. In 1980, nearly half of all fatal crashes were alcohol-related. By 2007, that proportion had fallen to 32%. That's good news. But it has to do with a whole lot of things that have affected a cultural change. Not simply one thing, not simply the lowering of the age. Many anti-drunk driving policies have been implemented in the last 25 years. There are some of them. Furthermore, mandatory seatbelt and airbag laws have made automobiles safer. That's a good thing. And perhaps most important of all, the designated driver, a term that was certainly not a part of my vocabulary when I was in college, has become a commonplace now among young adults, but actually among citizens of all ages. A cultural change has been brought about. And as an administrator at the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration acknowledged in 2003, if you look back, it's no longer acceptable to drive drunk. It's socially reprehensible, in fact, to drive drunk. Everyone will agree it was a wink and a nod 20 years ago. It's not that gray an area anymore. Does anyone really believe we are overnight going to unlearn all that we have learned about drinking and driving? Do we give so little credit to ourselves and to our fellow citizens truly to believe that? There is new evidence concerning the drinking age and alcohol-related traffic fatalities. And the conclusion drawn by a recent study published in Forbes magazine is that a policy imposed from on high, especially one that is readily evaded and opposed by a large fraction of the citizenry, is virtually guaranteed to fail. And why is that? The simple reason is that at age 18, in the eyes of the law, you're an adult. And don't be misled by assertions that you can't be elected president at age 18. Well, the Constitution stipulates that. And don't be misled by assertions that you can't rent a car or a hotel room at age 18. There's no federal law prohibiting that. The insurance companies, the hotel operators can set any age they want to. No state will lose 10% of its highway funds if it adjusts that age. That's an apple and orange comparison. You are an adult in the eyes of the law at 18. And that means you can enlist or be drafted. It means you can marry, adopt children, and be a legal guardian. It means that you can open a bank account, go into debt, own property, and sue. It means you can vote and seek or hold public office. It means you can purchase firearms. It means you can smoke, buy lottery tickets, and gamble. It means you can enter into legally binding contracts. It means you can sit on a jury. But can you buy a beer? You lack maturity. You lack judgment. Your brain's not fully developed. No. The current generation of young adults has no idea where 21 comes from. Why not 20? Why not 22? 21 is meaningless. At one time, it was the age of legal adulthood. It is no longer. The age at which you are a legal adult is 18. This abridgment, this exception, in order to be justified, needs to be explained and needs to work. We need to find a common sense solution to the presence of alcohol in the lives of young adults. Our current approach to binge drinking is about as effective as a parachute that opens on the second bounce. Even the president of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and if we had audio and video, I would show you this clip from the 60 Minutes broadcast, is asked, is it your goal, Mr. Hurley, to eliminate drinking among those under the age of 21? His answer, yes. The next question, is that realistic? And he says, laughing, no. We need to find realistic ways to make a difference. The first thing we need to do is revisit the whole matter of alcohol education, and in my view, we need to make it mandatory. We need to think of alcohol education as something more than an aspect of intervention or prevention or punishment. Alcohol education is mandatory now, but only after you've been convicted of DUI. More and more college campuses are adopting alcohol education programs of various forms, but until we address the issue of preparing young adults to make responsible decisions about alcohol in the same way that we address preparing young people to make responsible decisions about operating an automobile, which is to say we don't simply employ terror tactics and prohibition lectures, we're not going to be very effective. We need to involve parents, and in a great many states, parents themselves are violating the law if they serve alcohol to their sons and daughters in the presence of their own home. We need to revisit the 10% highway fund incentive, as it's called. And it seems to me that it's time for Congress to allow those states that want to try something different a waiver of this 10% highway fund penalty to try something different. And what I have in mind is, again, based upon the driver's ed analogy, which is inexact but instructive. We would never think, on the day you reach legal driving age, of throwing you the keys to the car and saying, here are the keys, there's the car, good luck, you go figure it out. Maybe your friends can take you off into some dark field and help you learn how to operate this 2,000-pound machine capable of going 90 miles an hour. I'd love to help you do that, but if I did as your parent, we'd both be arrested and our state would forfeit 10% of its federal highway funds. So, good luck. maybe you can figure out how to become a safe driver. Well, that's nonsense. But that's pretty close to how we deal with alcohol preparation now, isn't it? What if we mandated alcohol education, and what if, in response to good legal behavior, observance of the alcohol laws of the issuing state, we gave a license, which would be retained so long as one continued to observe the laws of the issuing state. States could have the option of working out various programs, and the genius of federalism, under which the states once were little laboratories of progressivism, would, instead of a one-size-fits-all federal mandate 1984 all-time program, might be able to come up with something better. If New Jersey doesn't want to lower its age, the federal government shouldn't force New Jersey to lower its age. Neither should New Jersey force Vermont or Tennessee or Montana to do what New Jersey thinks is best for it. Let federalism prevail. We want to take drunks off the highways. There are better ways to do that. If raising the drinking age is the best way to take drunks off the highways, why stop at 21? We'll take more off if we raise it to 30, won't we? And we'll take still more off if we raise it to 50. Why, if we raise it to 80 or 90, we'll eliminate the problem of drunken driving, won't we? Somewhere the logic breaks down. You want to take drunks off the highways, make it so the drunk's car won't start. The technology exists to do that. Don't penalize and punish an entire generation of young people and discriminate against them on the basis of age. Go after the menaces, the drunk drivers, and mandate ignition interlocks for first-time DUI offenders. Maintain zero-tolerance laws for all under the age of 21, and perhaps consider access to various types of alcohol at various times. I'll conclude because my time is just about up, but I know there'll be questions, and I can use some of the rest of the slides in the question period. Sometimes we hear it said that this is simply a problem of enforcement, or it is simply a problem of the message we send. Well, the New Yorker article talks about a study done at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business, which found that public service advertising campaigns that use guilt or shame to warn against alcohol abuse can actually have the reverse effect, spurring increased drinking among target audiences. Think about that. And Gladwell concludes in his essay, we are reluctant to provide the young drinker with a positive and constructive example of how to drink. The consequences of that failure are considerable. So long as we persist in infantilizing young adults through policies of pronouncement and prohibition, so long as we continue to deny the reality that daily stares us in the face, for just so long do we continue to put lives at risk. Because, as Gladwell reminds us, in the end, culture is a more powerful tool in dealing with drinking than medicine, economics, or the law. I leave you with those thoughts because my time is up. There's so much more that might be said, and there are questions that I'm sure you have. And so I hope you will feel encouraged to raise them as we move into the discussion period. I thank you for your time.
If someone could put my slides on, I would appreciate it. And again, I would also like to thank James Sasso, Ken Kersch from the College Democrats of Boston College, the Campus Progress, and everybody else who organized this debate here at Boston College. I appreciate you inviting me, and I appreciate being here. Now, I have to confess something. I've never been on 60 Minutes. I've never been on Colbert or any of those shows that Dr. McCardell's been on. But I have been on C-SPAN. And the audience that day, I think, was 4 or 5, is what I heard. So, if it's March, John, it must be Boston College, right?
I guess so, yes.
We've lost track of the number of colleges we've been to doing these debates. But we're not tired of it, as you could tell by his talk. And I'm not either. I'm grateful that it gives me a chance to get a mechanism to get the information out that I think you need on this issue so that you can make an informed decision. Okay. Should the minimum legal drinking age remain at 21? I hope I can answer that by the end of this talk. Brief history, Dr. McCardell mentioned a little bit, but back in 1933 when Prohibition was repealed, 21st Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, the drinking age was turned over to the states. Most of the states in 1933 set their drinking age at 21. Here are 11 states in this slide who set it at 21 and never did change it. They never did lower it. They felt it was an appropriate age. But then, lo and behold, along came the 26th Amendment to the Constitution, which lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. And once that happened, states began to lower their drinking age. They saw some relationship between the voting age and the drinking age for some reason. Anyway, studies in the 70s and 80s then showed that lowering the drinking age increased alcohol-related traffic fatalities significantly. And there was a lot of concern about that. And then along came Mothers Against Drunk Driving in 1980 and the President's Commission Against Drunk Driving in 1982. And then members of Congress, including Senator Frank Lautenberg from New Jersey, who felt that something had to be done about this crazy quilt drinking ages in the states. Some states were 18, some were 19, some were 20, some were 21. There were youth driving across borders in states that had higher drinking ages to lower drinking ages and then driving back impaired and getting involved in crashes. And so there was a blood border issue. And so, as John said, the legislation was signed, was adopted by Congress and signed by President Reagan, who is a states' rights president, but he felt that this was the right thing to do, that it should be a uniform drinking age and it should be 21. And so that legislation was adopted, signed in 1984. By 1988, every state had raised their drinking age to 21. But what did that say, and what did the laws say? They said it's illegal to possess alcohol if you're 21, and it's illegal to purchase alcohol if you're 21. That's all. It didn't say it's illegal to sell alcohol to those under 21. It didn't say you couldn't consume alcohol. And there were a whole lot of exceptions to that law. And there still are to this day. And there are at least 16 provisions to the underage drinking laws now in the states. So what happened, though, when the drinking age was raised? Well, the research shows reduction in alcohol consumption, I'll show you that, by those under 21. A reduction in drinking, driving, fatal crashes that was very, very significant, I'll show you that. But also a reduction in other alcohol-related injuries, homicides, suicides, and other unintentional injuries by those under age 21. The research is full of that. So, studies in the 80s and 90s showed that raising the drinking age saves lives. And as a matter of fact, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, where I worked at the time, estimated it was saving anywhere from 800 to 900 lives a year. There are dozens of studies that show raising the drinking age to 21 has been effective in reducing alcohol consumption and alcohol-related problems. Here are some of them, but there are dozens, and here are some of the better ones. There have been several reviews of the literature, and I'll point to the one on the bottom, Schultz, 2001. They concluded in a meta-analysis that lowering the drinking age resulted in an average of a 10% increase in crashes for those under age 21. Raising the drinking age resulted in a decrease in crashes, fatal crashes, involving a drinking driver of 16%. One of the best studied public health laws in history. It's one of the biggest successes that we've ever had in public health as far as a policy that's not really enforced, as you all know. Here's the data on the alcohol consumption. This was done early on when the states all raised the drinking age to 21, 13% reduction in alcohol consumption by those under age 21. Now, what about the drinking driving? Well, if you look at drinking drivers over age 21 involved in fatal crashes, and you look from 1982 to 2004, or you can go to 2008 now because it's been level, 33% decrease in drinking drivers over age 21 involved in fatal crashes during that time period. Now let's look at the drivers under age 21. A 62% decrease, twice the decrease in drinking drivers involved in fatal crashes during that time period. So whatever was working for the adults also worked for the youth, but something else worked. And what was it? It was the drinking age. Here's the over age 21. The red line are the sober drivers involved in fatal crashes, and we've actually had a gradual increase in the number of sober drivers. We just had more drivers out there. And so we've had an increase in sober drivers involved in fatal crashes. And then if you look at the decrease in the adults, 21 and older, it's about the same as the increase. So it's been a wash. 33% decrease drinking drivers, 38% increase in the sober. Here's the underage 21. While it's fluctuated for the sober underage 21, it still results in about a 9% increase over the years. But look at the drinking drivers. Again, 62% decrease, and it's maintained it. It's not continuing to go down, but it's maintained that decrease, which means the law is still working. Canada. A lot of times it's mentioned that Canada had a similar decrease in the underage 21 drinking drivers in fatal crashes. Yes, they did. But they also had the same decrease for the adult drivers. Canada did a lot of other things over and above the U.S. They have a lower BAC limit. For a while there they did. And so it affected the adults and the youth at the same rate. So just because Canada had the same kind of decrease doesn't mean our 21 law didn't work. It did. And then there's been other evidence, other research that shows alcohol-related homicides, suicides, and other unintentional injuries have been reduced, associated with the drinking age of 21. Now let's get to the European myth. A lot of people think that because in Europe the drinking ages are lower, that the culture is a little bit better and young people don't binge drink or reach intoxication levels at the same rates as the U.S. Well, it's just simply not true. There have been several studies of this, but the bottom line is 26 countries have higher rates of adolescent intoxication, that is 15 and 16-year-olds now. 15, 16-year-olds becoming intoxicated. Only 9 countries have lower rates than the U.S. There's the U.S. at the very end. About 33, 34% of our youth, 15 to 16, reported being intoxicated in the past year, in 2007. Look at all the countries that have higher rates, and only a handful that have lower rates. So the lower drinking ages in Europe don't mean the kids don't get drunk. They do at even higher rates. Here's first intoxication before age 13. This is very important because if you become intoxicated before age 13, there's a risk for all kinds of bad things happening in the future to you. U.S., about 8% of our youth report being intoxicated before age 13. Look at some of the other countries. 30% of them. 30% of the youth report intoxication before age 13, and those are in countries with lower drinking ages. And then here's just another study by the OECD. The U.S. again is on the bottom. This is drunkenness among 15-year-olds, drunk at least twice in your life. And again, the U.S. is at the bottom. All the other countries are at higher rates. And Europe is beginning to talk about the problem now. This is some of the British papers, and they're talking about the youth getting trashed and the fact that something has to be done. And they're even talking about raising a drinking age in Great Britain and also in France. Now, France, it's 16. They're talking about raising it to 18. But there is some talk in Europe now about the drinking age, and also in Australia. Now let's talk about college binge drinking. it's been said that it's a recent phenomenon. It's not a recent phenomenon. I would contend that it's been going on, at least in America, since the colonial days. And there's a book published in 1953 by Strauss and Bacon talking about college drinking. And they estimated in 1950 that 65% of college students drank in the past 30 days. And our college alcohol survey in 2007 said 70%. So a little bit higher than it was in 1950, but really there hasn't been any change. College binge drinking is cultural and has nothing to do with the drinking age, in my opinion. Here's college binge drinking. Here's the Monitoring the Future, using several colleges. And there is no increase. Now, these are too high. These rates are too high, 45, 46, 47% of, on average, college students report binge drinking in the past 30 days. It is way too high, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed over the years. It has nothing to do with the drinking age. And then if we want to look at just young people in general binge drinking, 19 and 20-year-olds, college, non-college, the rates are lower. It's about 35%, but again, no change in that. So there isn't any evidence that there is any increase in clandestine drinking or binge drinking by people under 21 because of the drinking age. As a matter of fact, if you look at 8th graders here, the powder blue line, they're continuing to go down, the reported binge drinking, and so are 10th graders. The seniors in high school, the 12th graders, did go down for a while, went up, went down, went up, and so they're remaining around stable. And let's look at alcohol attributable deaths due to alcohol for those under age 21. It may not be 1984 anymore, but motor vehicle fatalities are still the by far #1 cause of death for alcohol-related injuries. All right? It's still a big problem. It was 5,000 back in the 80s. It's now 2,000, but it's still almost half of the alcohol attributable deaths, so we still have to worry about it. The next one in line is homicides at 1,200. And that's either the perpetrator or the victim having alcohol in their system. And then the rest are very, very low, as you can see here. So it's still a motor vehicle problem, whether it's 1984 or 2010. And as tragic as alcohol poisonings are, and they are very tragic events and they shouldn't happen, they happen to adults too. But here's the data. Here are your 18 to 20-year-olds, and about 9 or 10 a year on the average are dying of alcohol poisoning, as opposed to for 21 to 24-year-olds up in the 20s. And no dramatic increases or decreases either way on this. Here's off or non-highway injury deaths for a 5-year period. And again, the 18 to 20-year-olds, we're talking about 150, and it's going down to about 140 something over the past 5 or 6 years. And we're talking 200, 300 for the 21 to 24-year-olds. But nowhere near what the highway deaths are. And if you want to learn about any new research and you want to learn whether the adult laws are affecting the youth as much as the drinking age laws, thank you very much for asking. Myself and my colleagues just published a study last, I think it was August or July of 2009. It's what we found, that the underage drinking laws, the two core laws, possession and purchase, accounted for a 16% decrease in the ratio of drinking drivers to non-drinking drivers under the age of 21 in fatal crashes. That's a measure that's used in this research. Use and lose laws accounted for a 5% decrease. So did zero tolerance for driving, accounted for 5%. Keg registration laws went the other way. States that had keg registration laws, the underage 21 drinking went up. I'll try to explain that later. Graduated licensing with night restrictions has been no effect so far. Here are the adult laws, and here are their effects on the youth under age 21. Yes, the .08 law, the .10 law, the seatbelt law, and the ALR law all had an effect, but not as much as the drinking age. And these are taking into account the fact that these other laws had an effect. Here's for the over age 25, and it's, of course, just the adult laws that had an effect on them. And remember, they decreased at half the rate that the under age 21 decreased. Surgeon General came out with a report, 2007. The very prestigious National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine came out with a book in 2004. Not one page, not one paragraph, not one word even mentions lowering the drinking age as part of the solution to the underage drinking problem. So, has it been effective? A resounding yes. 40 to 50 peer-reviewed studies say so. The research also shows that when drinking age is lowered, the problems increase. So raising the drinking age reduces the problems. Lowering the drinking age increases the problems. And if you lower the drinking age, that means you start drinking at a younger age. If you lower it to 18, that means 15, 16, 17-year-olds start drinking, more so than if it's 21. Does it eliminate underage drinking? No, of course not. Do drunk driving laws eliminate drunk driving? No, they reduce drunk driving. They don't eliminate it. Do speed limits eliminate speeding? No, they reduce speeding. How many in this room went over the speed limit within the past 30 days? Well, there you go. Should it remain at 21? Absolutely. Remember, if you start drinking at age 18 versus 21, 15% of you will become alcohol dependent versus 9% if you start at 21. You'll have 2.4 times the odds of being in a motor vehicle crash as a drinking driver if you start at 18, and 1.6 times the odds of being in a fight after drinking. Has it been harmful? No. There's no evidence whatsoever that the drinking age has anything to do with increases in alcohol poisoning. There hasn't been any increases in alcohol poisoning. Binge drinking in uncontrolled clandestine environments, I've never seen any research that shows that. Or alcohol-related injuries of any kind. If I'm old enough to go to war, I'm old enough to vote, I should be old enough to drink. Well, we have many rights of initiation. Again, in most states, license to carry a handgun, age 21, renting a hotel room, age 21, renting a car, age 25. And the brain's not fully developed until age 25. You're all hearing about that research, right? There's no evidence that lowering the drinking age to 18 for those who complete an alcohol course will have any effect on the problem. As a matter of fact, driver education by itself had no effect on youth crashes. Neither did the DARE education program have any effect on drug use by youth. Education alone doesn't work in this field. You need more than education. Yes, we need to be educated. I'm not against that. But there needs to be something else. There need to be policies. There needs to be enforcement. Then you see an effect. College interventions, are there things that work? Yeah, there are things that work. You don't have to lower the drinking age to 18 to reduce the problem. There are lots of things that work. Screening and brief interventions, limiting alcohol availability, parental notification of alcohol incidences. Dr. Jonathan Gibraltar from Frostburg State took it upon himself to clean up his campus. He went out and found out where all the drinking was going on, and he instituted policies, and it's worked on his campus. Strategies that show evidence of reducing underage drinking, strengthening the laws, better enforcement of the laws, educating parents about the situation, increasing the excise tax. That would increase the price. It would reduce consumption. It would reduce the problems. Delaying the age of onset of drinking, very, very important. You don't want youth starting to drink at age 13, 14, 15, 16. And denormalizing binge drinking. Right now, I view underage drinking, and especially binge drinking, the way drunk driving was viewed back in the 70s. It's tolerated. It's maybe not socially acceptable, but people are accepting it. They just shrug their shoulders and say, well, what are you going to do? We need to denormalize it. It's something that the kids who don't binge drink, and it's at least 55% to 60% of the college students who don't binge drink, have to put some pressure on the ones who do. And that will denormalize it. So, we've saved, and I have to add 2008 and 9 to this slide, and if I do, we're up over about 28,000 lives saved so far, just on the highways, because of raising the drinking age. 80% of the public are in favor of keeping the drinking age at 21. Virtually every single public health association is in favor of 21. The American Medical Association, Centers for Disease Control, Surgeon General, American Public Health Association, International Association of Chiefs of Police, and of course MAD and SAD. And remember, 135 college presidents who signed this Amethyst initiative is really only 3 or 4% of all the colleges in the United States. So it's not very many that think that we should talk about this. So, should we keep drinking age 21? Yeah, for good reasons. Saves lives. Lower the drinking age, the earlier you start drinking, the greater the problems. European countries, big myth. And the emerging research on the brain. And that's beginning to show that excessive drinking by youth under age 21 can cause permanent damage. Here's my contact information. I'd be glad to send you any of the studies that I talked about, the PowerPoint. I don't know all the answers to this issue, obviously. I do know some. But I do know that lowering the drinking age is not one of them. Thank you.